Hello, everybody. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum. A'udhu billahi min shaitan rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim wad-dallin. Ameen. Now that I've cast a spell on all of you. So it's customary for Muslims before they begin a gathering to say a prayer in Arabic. For all the people who speak Arabic, they can understand what they're saying, and everybody who doesn't, it makes them feel really uncomfortable. So you're welcome. So welcome to the Muslim Community Center, the MCC. We're very happy to have you here. We're a regional mosque. We serve as a place for individuals to learn, to pray, to socialize, to utilize a space situated between intellectual and spiritual crossroads. Each day we find community through faith, and this afternoon you've really honored us by coming together, the hundreds of congregants that come here, because you're taking time out of your Sunday to join us for a fascinating talk about Islamophobia and why it matters to all of us. These have been uncertain times for American Muslims, the community here, and you're taking time to learn about this mosque, the Islamic faith, and I can truly tell you that it means a lot to every person who worships here. So thank you, thank you. We'll have some snacks in the fellowship hall after the presentation and Q&A. We'll end at 3:15 here, and along with refreshments, we have a 10-minute tour of the facility, if you'd like to stay for that, of the mosque and the facility. Let me just mention, we just finished our Sunday school, 425 kids running around the facility, so it's not the most tidy. We like to keep it, but we hope you all understand. So real quick, let me mention our speaker, Mr. Steve Slocum. He spent 5 years as a Christian missionary in Kazakhstan. That's a Muslim majority country, and that forever altered his view of Muslims and his understanding of Islam. Today, with an anti-Islam sentiment at an all-time high, Mr. Slocum is on a mission to dispel rumors and myths about Muslims and to shed light on Islam's peaceful mainstream. His debut book, Why Do They Hate Us? Making Peace with the Muslim World, was released this summer. And through that book and through his work, his community nonprofit, Salam USA, he sees that gulf of misunderstanding out there, and he's bridging that gap. So he's to be commended for that. So please help me in welcoming Mr. Steve Slocum.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to see all of you. This place really was hopping when I got here. It was hopping so much that when I went out to my car to get a little box of books, someone was getting into my car. It was a little girl who thought it was her grandpa's car. So we had a nice little conversation, and she went to a different car. So anyway, thanks so much for being here. It's my privilege to be here, and it really is exciting for me to see such a huge community center in San Diego. I was telling Munir that our community center there is the main room is about the size of this room. So yeah, it's great to see such a large community center, and it's also great to see so many visitors here, learning about it. So just a little bit about my story. 27 years ago, I took my family, my wife and 3 children, to Kazakhstan as a missionary, and we were missionaries, and our goal there was to convert Muslims to the Christian faith. So we spent 5 years there, and really that was the beginning for me of many profound changes in my personal life, in my personal spirituality, and my understanding of spirituality in general. The people of Kazakhstan were, they were just coming out of, it was right after the breakup of the Soviet Union. So for the previous several decades, atheism was the mandated faith, and this affected both the Muslim community as well as the Christian community. There was about 50-50 Orthodox Russians and Kazakh Muslims, and so both faiths were barely holding on. Many, it had been a full generation, who had never really learned about their faith, had been taught the opposite of their faith. So they were holding on, but apart from the faith was the deep centuries-old traditions, especially of hospitality, which was the thing that affected us most profoundly. You know, the people were so generous, loving to us, even though we were there as Christian missionaries, you know, in a Muslim land. There was nothing but generosity, love, friendship, warmth, hospitality that we experienced there. And just to tell the story, those who have, you know, who come from Muslim backgrounds or Eastern lands, probably this will seem like nothing to them, but for those of us who are from the West, you know, one of the first times we were invited to a home for dinner, which happened often, very often. The family, you know, we knew nothing. We barely spoke the language. We didn't know anything about cultural nuances, let alone actual, you know, cultural big issues. So we were invited to this home, and we sat down, and we were given a wonderful heaping plate full of food, which we promptly finished, and we're thinking, oh, that was very nice. So when we finished, that means that was the signal to, again, fill the plate with more food. And so we thought, oh, okay. And so we finished it again. And finally, you know, we got to a point where, you know, in this culture, it's different. You know, you get a single plate full of food, you eat it, and you say thank you, and that's the end of it, right? But here, but in Kazakhstan, it wasn't like that. It was you know, just heaping generosity. And anyway, I only tell this story because we were laughing and enjoying all the food and enjoying our own lack of awareness and beginning to gain some awareness. Is the mic on again, or is everyone okay? Okay. And so I tell that story because I later found out that this family who had been sharing with us so abundantly, it turned out they were sharing with us the last of the food that they had. And we were ignorant and completely unaware and eating all of the food that this family had for their whole family. And this was the power of their hospitality ethic, which was so deeply ingrained in them and which we were so ignorant of. And so that story and many others like it had a profound effect on us, that this culture was so giving and so loving to us, even though we were there, you know, with questionable motives. And honestly, we weren't honest about those motives. We didn't tell people that's what we were there to do, but that's what we were there to do. So it had a profound effect on me. At the same time, I was experiencing things that were causing me to ask a lot of questions within the missionary community that I was involved in. There was a lot of things. There were a lot of things taking place that were not very, very good. It was actually, honestly, it was. I have to be honest. It was a horrible experience, and it affected my family profoundly. In the end, what happened was, I'm going to share with you a very personal story, which affected my life to the point. Yeah, I'll just share the story. There was so much animosity within the missionary community that one of the leaders, the leader of the community, decided that he didn't want me to be there anymore, and so rather than attack me, which he tried, he attacked my son, who was a student at the school there, at the missionary school there, and he told the teacher of the school that let's get this boy thrown out of the school so that his father will have to leave the country. Long story short, I didn't find out about this until it was too late. My son went into a deep depression, and we left. When I did find out about it, we immediately left the country, came back to the States and began to rebuild our lives. But it was too late for my son. He went into a depression and committed suicide at the age of 21. So yeah, it was profoundly, there really aren't any words to describe it. It changed my life powerfully. At the same time, I'm experiencing loving warmth, hospitality, generosity from within the Muslim community. I'm experiencing this kind of the horrible things that affected my life and my family. We paid a deep price at that time. So as you can understand, I would be thinking a lot. I would be going through a lot of transition and change and processing to do this, and it did affect me profoundly. My heart changed. My heart began to change from thinking that here I was going to, as a white American, going to another culture to change them and to change them to my way. My way wasn't seeming such a good way at that time, and the way of those, the people that I was visiting, seemed very nice at the time. So it Thank you. Now, did everyone hear everything up until now? Because it was like kind of important. Thank you. So my heart began to change. Now, I have not become a Muslim, but I will say this: I happily and joyfully come into a Muslim community center, and I stand in line with my brothers and sisters from the Muslim faith, and I pray with them with joy. So I find myself able to pray with my Christian friends and also to pray with my Muslim friends, and I find this to be so powerful. There's nothing like standing before God together. Everything else becomes meaningless, you know. To understand, well, you don't understand anything, but you pray together and you realize that we're all just the same before the Almighty. So that was such an important experience for me. So for now, I focus on peace. I focus on peacemaking, and because of the times that we live in, I find myself forced to focus on countering Islamophobia, which has become so prevalent now. Let's see, could we show the video? This is a video of my organization, Salam. We bring Muslims and non-Muslims together, and I'm sure a lot of you, since this is an interfaith group, have experienced this before, but this was one of our events in San Diego, and we'll talk about that. This is our first friendship dinner. Two different cultural groups, Muslims from the community and non-Muslims from the community, sharing a meal together. And
you get to know people on the human level. It's one-on-one. Really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether I'm a non-Muslim or they're a Muslim. We're just two people having a conversation, and our lives are very similar.
Do you think Islam is at war with the West?
I think Islam hates us.
Hate crimes against Muslim Americans saw a 99% increase in the past 2 years.
Only 25% of Americans have ever met a Muslim. Salam's mission is to create friendship and mutual understanding between Muslims and non-Muslims.
Wa alaikum salam. How are you doing? American Muslims, all what they want is to be treated fairly, to be looked at as a vibrant portion of the American social fabric. This work that we are doing is very important in order to correct these misconceptions and to let people understand what Islam is all about and who are the Muslims from the source.
We accomplish our mission in three ways: awareness, people to people, and experiential travel.
Well, it's a friendship dinner. the intent is for people to get to know one another. You know, we find that everybody has the same story, really. Trying to get our kids through school and the things that our kids do and our parents and our hopes and our dreams, they're all the same.
Yeah, dessert is coming. It's baklava.
Awesome.
Well, I would love to see events like this multiplied all over the United States, just bringing friendship between these communities, which may not naturally come together, but when we do come together, it's just wonderful. That was our very first friendship dinner event, and we just had a annual repeat of that event just a couple days ago. It was wonderful. A lot of new people, and what I like about it is that we get a lot of new faces coming together. Not sometimes those of us that work in the interfaith realm. Sometimes we find ourselves meeting with each other over and over again. But I try to get out there and reach out to those who've never met a Muslim and get them coming to the events. So Salam has, I've developed 6 steps. It's somewhat arbitrary, but this works for us. 6 steps of Salam that I call. The first one is awareness. We work on awareness, correcting misconceptions. I generally bring a group of Muslim speakers, 2 or 3. Usually they're women. 2 out of 3 of them will be women, and they're very they're educated and trained for this type of event, and they come to a church or some activist group, any kind of community group, and they just share about their faith and give people an opportunity to hear directly from Muslims what Islam is about, because as you know, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So that's the first step. Second step is a mosque visit. After that, well, during that first meeting, I get the folks to sign up who are interested in coming to a mosque and visiting. And for many, that's the very first time they will have ever visited a mosque, and it's also a good thing to do. Third is we do friendship dinners, which you saw right there, which then is a little deeper level when people share a meal together. Again, wonderful things happen, and you know, I love that video because it was captured that from both the non-Muslim perspective and from the Muslim perspective. You know, everyone just said the same thing. You know, we're all just the same. We're all just people. We're all just, you know, concerned about our families, about our jobs, about living a prosperous, peaceful life, and that really comes to light during those dinners. Fourth, we try to take it a little deeper and do small group discussion meetings. We have one where we're bringing some from the refugee community into a small group discussion with the host community. It's a little bit challenging with language issues and so on, but it can be very powerful. Every time I've ever had an event where we've had Muslim attendees, the non-Muslims are always extremely moved by the stories that are told by those from the Muslim community, especially those who have had their lives changed because of targeting, because of persecution. So it's always very powerful when we have these smaller group meetings and people connect on a heart-to-heart level, and non-Muslims hear the stories of Muslims who've experienced you know, targeting in one form or another. Or even if it's not targeting, their lives have changed. Their lives have changed because of what we've seen happening here in the United States in the last couple of decades. Level 5 is fun, step 5. That's when we call it diplomacy, and I've coordinated with a group in San Diego and working with, we're trying to get some other arrangements in other cities with this. It's an NGO that hosts dignitaries through the State Department And so whenever they bring in dignitaries from Muslim-majority countries, we provide opportunities for local families to host them for dinner. And so this is the first time a lot of people will have ever met not a Muslim American, but a Muslim actually from a Muslim majority country, and not just an ordinary person, but some sort of dignitary, whether it's a person involved in education or business or government business. So that's, I've had wonderful experiences, and usually the outcome of those events is visits are planned between the families where they're gonna come to this country and visit this family. So those are exciting. And then the level 6 is travel, where I take a group of non-Muslim Americans to a Muslim majority country, and this is the highest level. Not everybody gets to this level, but those that are really interested, because it's one thing to be in the host country and everything around you is familiar and you're hosting others from other lands. But when you are the visitor, and I've experienced this, trust me, when every fiber of your being is longing for something familiar, and you're the guest in another land, this will change you. This will change a person. It puts them in a place where they're, physiologically their brain is firing, just trying to survive, and then emotionally they're connecting with people who are showing them hospitality. So I found, for myself, this was where I found the most profound changes. So I like to provide that opportunity for others. And I'm excited to announce we have our first trip planned for next summer, June 15 to 30. We're going to be going to Israel, Palestine, Jordan. It's not a Holy Land trip. It's a cultural awareness trip. We're going to be experiencing the culture of that area, including Palestine and Jordan. And so anyway, it's exciting. You'll see it on my website soon. I don't even have it up on the website yet. So I want to talk about my book. My book is called Why Do They Hate Us? When you hear that title, it probably causes you to ask questions. That's actually not my question. That's a quotation. Does anyone know who I'm quoting in that title? Thank you. Yes, it's a quotation from George W. Bush. The book is about the subtitle, Making Peace with the Muslim World. 9 days after 9/11, George W. Bush addressed a joint session of Congress, and in the middle of his speech, he made this question, why do they hate us? And who remembers what his answer was? They hate our freedoms. They hate our way of life. And so this set the stage for an invasion of Afghanistan, and not long after that, the United States invaded Iraq for no reason, and it began the war on terror, which has been going on for the last 20 years or almost, and resulted in just staggering loss of life and suffering. Among not just Iraq and Afghanistan, but really, I think in my book I write that there are only 4 Muslim countries that have not been touched by United States intervention since the late 70s, when the revolution in Iran took place. So yeah, so I write about that. So my book addresses step 1 of the 6 steps that I gave, awareness. I address a lot of the, we all know there's a lot of misinformation about Islam out there these days. It's not just a bunch of uninformed Americans who have wrong ideas. This, I'm sure you're all aware of. I wasn't aware of this when I started the project. After I started the project and began to do some research, I learned of the Islamophobia Network, which is basically a network of so-called information centers. They're actual misinformation centers. They're nonprofits. They're exempt from paying any tax. They receive hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations, right? They're tax exempt, and they exist for the purpose of promoting misinformation. Very simple misinformation, but the misinformation is, as we all can see, because today, almost 20 years after 9/11, hate crimes against Muslims are more than they were in the year after 9/11. So this misinformation is very effective. The misinformation is put out there not because, people want to see the Muslim community targeted. It's put out there for very simple political reasons. Analysts and strategists determined not long after 9/11 that Islamophobia was a very effective political device. But they heartlessly promote this, heartlessly in the sense that they completely disregard the fact that people are targeted, every day in the streets, and that things happen such as what happened in Christchurch. So I address that. I address that in my book. I address a lot of the misinformation. The misinformation I find, the questions that I find most often, and again, I'm out there not in the interfaith community. I'm out there talking to people who are, non-religious, a lot of them, and sometimes in churches, but churches that aren't involved in the interfaith community. So what I find is that the three main issues that people have are Sharia. Sharia, when people think of Sharia, what do they think of? They think of what you see on United States news, Taliban, ISIS, chop off your hand, kill all the infidels, that sort of thing. That is the definition of Sharia to most Americans. So I address that. Also the issue of jihad and infidels. As a missionary, here's what I was taught. I was taught that Islam spread because Muhammad was a warrior, and that anyone who didn't convert, he threatened to, behead them. Basically, this is what I was taught. Now I'm sorry. Some of this stuff is just not fun to hear, and I apologize for that. But I want to share with you how we're breaking these things down to bring some truth out. And thank you for, I know it's not easy to hear a lot of this stuff. So thank you for being acceptable to that. I address that whole thing about who is the infidel. People think, today they say the infidel represents Christians and Jews, but of course we know that's not true, and I'm going to tell you more about that in a minute. And then, of course, the third issue that is a big one for non-Muslims is the status of women within Islam. Now, of course, certain things that happen, like in countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran, through the government, not through the teaching of Islam, give people, the wrong idea about how Islam addresses the issue of women. So in my book, I basically address all of those issues, and I don't start from zero. My audience is non-Muslim Americans, and I don't start from zero. I start from -10. I start from the point of understanding that what people think they know about Islam is false. So again, I ask for patience and understanding from the Muslim community, because some of what I say may seem ridiculous. It may seem childish. It may seem, how could I even be talking about this? But I ask for patience and understanding, because I'm addressing people who everything that they, or not everything, but most of what they know about Islam is false. So that's where I start from -10. And I don't even begin to think that I'm going to speak for Muslims or on behalf of Muslims. My goal is not to speak for Muslims. My goal is to clear the fog of misinformation so that Muslims, all of you who are Muslims here, can speak for yourselves, because you know you're much more qualified than I am, of course. And one thing that I did learn in this process is that if I want to learn about Islam, the best place to learn about Islam is not from, say, Christians. Not that it's, you know, it doesn't have to, that doesn't have to be horrible, but it's better to learn about Islam from Muslims. And I challenge you with the same thing. You know, if you want to learn about the Christian faith, you know, don't learn about the Christian faith from Muslims who are going to say things that, like, Christians believe in 3 gods and so on. Yeah, I mean, it might sound like that, but learn the nuances from the Christian perspective. So I challenge the Muslims here about that as well. And that's what I challenge Christians with. Learn Islam from Muslims, not from some book that some Christian theologian wrote who was completely invested in proving Islam to be, you know, false. So anyway, chapter 1, I introduced the concept of Sharia. The best way I found this, and this is basically just my own journey, the best way I found of learning what Sharia really is to just look at the life of Muhammad. So I write the biography of Muhammad, you know, how he grew up as an orphan, and so on, and in the context of a culture that oppressed the poor, oppressed women. And so I write about the life of Muhammad, and again, as Muslims, you might, there might be a lot of things that you could find fault with in my writing. It's probably writing as if it's writing to a kindergartner, if you know, to a Muslim. But again, like I say, I'm addressing people who are starting from -10. So I write about, and this addresses both the subject of Sharia and the subject of women, the life of Muhammad, and the story of the first community in Medina. So people can see that right from the very beginning. Islam was founded in social justice and equality of all people in the middle of a culture that was oppressing women, that was oppressing the poor. So that's the first chapter. The second, after that, I address the subject of jihad and infidels, in the sense that I talk about the story of that first community and how they came under attack by the Quraysh, and how Islam was based in defensive struggle for survival, and try to clear up this misconception that Islam is all about warfare and, you know, jihad in the sense of, you know, in the complete wrong sense of the word. So I address that. Then I talk about the present day Islam only in the sense of what my own experiences are, my experiences of coming to places like this and you know, praying with Muslims, meeting Muslims, going to iftar dinners and so on. And I just write all stories of my experiences doing that. And then I address the actual issue of extremism. And of course, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. We all understand that, you know, the misconception is, you know, and I don't know how many of you here have heard this, you know, and I'm sure, I think this is the dominant view, is that, you know, why did 9/11 happen? 9/11 happened because, you know, Muslims like Osama bin Laden wanted to convert the United States to Islam, and so they decided to fly airplanes into the side of buildings. I mean, this is what people think. I hope it's not too shocking to you, but this is what people think. So I address that, and I address very in excruciating detail and with a lot of research and a lot of references that extremism is based on political issues. It's based on United States foreign policy. It has nothing to do with Islam and you know, these things that they say about it. So that's an important chapter, and I find that many people, non-Muslims who read that, really are just shocked to find out, because sad to say, many Americans are completely ignorant of our foreign policy and the effect that it has around the world. And finally, I address solutions. How can we help? How can we fix this problem of Islamophobia? And I find that you know, the 6 steps, and what it boils down to is one-on-one interaction. When you meet someone from this culture that you fear, oftentimes that fear can dissipate. And so I'm gonna let's watch the second video. And as you watch this video, I don't want you to pay attention so much to my answers. They had me on the news in Los Angeles, and I don't want you to focus on my answers as much as the questions. Listen to these questions, and then we'll go from there.
11 terror attacks 18 years ago this week stoked fear of the Muslim community in some people.
After the attacks, President George W. Bush asked, quote, "Why do they hate us?" A question that was echoed by President Trump years later.
Do you think Islam is at war with the West?
I think Islam hates us. There's something there that there's a tremendous hatred there. There's a tremendous hatred. We have to get to the bottom of it. There is an unbelievable hatred of us.
A new book tries to clear up the misconceptions about the Muslim religion.
Joining us today, the author of the book, Why Do They Hate Us? Making Peace with the Muslim World, peace activist Steve Slocum is here. He's the founder of salamusa.org. Welcome, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you.
This fear of Muslims and the prejudices that they face, you say it's an Islamophobia that has deep roots in history.
Well, no, actually, I wouldn't say that it has deep roots in history. I'd say it's very recent, and it mainly came about after 9/11, and these fears have been, as we just saw there, have been stoked for political reasons. What I say is that it was a trauma that was experienced by the American people, and this trauma has not been dealt with, and it was an individual trauma when we all witnessed those horrible events, and we experienced it collectively as a nation, and we're still living with those effects. In fact, even today, Islamophobia, the fear of Muslims, and hate crimes against Muslims are more than they were in the year after 9/11.
Many Muslim countries condemn the attacks on 9/11. I'm saying many, I'm not saying all. Is that correct? There's some that don't publicly.
No, I mean, I can't answer that question for sure, but maybe there was a survey done by Gallup in the Muslim world, and what they discovered was that 93% of Muslims from all over the world as individuals condemned those attacks.
And your book really takes the spotlight off of extremists, and it sheds the light on the heart of everyday Muslim people, right? And that's where people start to have understanding.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's really where I learned it. As I was a missionary in Kazakhstan for 5 years, so I had just a lot of experience with a Muslim culture, and I had a lot of Muslim friends. So yeah, taking the spotlight off of the extremists and putting it on the mainstream, all of those 93% that are all over the place, they're here in the United States, and they're all over the world, and yeah, let's look at them and learn about Islam from them.
President Trump recently tried to broker a peace deal with the Taliban. He invited officials of the Taliban to Camp David. Many people criticized him for that. He ultimately canceled the talks. Is there a way to know what that 93% of Muslims around the world and American Muslims, how they feel about what? about that decision?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, about that decision, or about what decision are you referring to? The cancellation?
To cancel the talks,
Yeah.
and or to have them here at all.
Well, what I say always is just to get some friends, talk to the Muslims directly themselves. Don't read what you see on the internet. You know, go to the library, check out books, get some really good academic information, and meet a Muslim and get it directly from them.
When the federal government enacted the so-called Muslim travel ban, many demonstrations against that policy took place all over the country at airports and different places. How did Muslim Americans view that and respond to that as well?
Well, again, I don't like to speak for them, but the Muslims that I knew were very hurt by it, and especially those who were directly affected. You know, people from those banned countries were here, and they were hearing that they would have absolutely no possibility of seeing any of their family members from that country because they were forever banned from ever setting foot. So it was a very hurtful thing to them.
So much of, I think, Islamophobia and our prejudices and bigotry, it's based on ignorance and fear. And what are some practical ways that your organization suggests that people embrace people who may have religious beliefs that are not their own?
Yeah, so I usually recommend three things. First one, of course, is read my book, Why Do They Hate Us? Which I just want to say the title is not a question of mine. The book is about making peace with the Muslim world. The title is a direct quotation, which you already quoted, of George W. Bush. So I recommend reading my book and getting some facts, getting some awareness. Like I said, don't get it from the internet, get it from good academic sources. Secondly, meet a Muslim. Spend time. If you have a Muslim friend at work or in your neighborhood or anywhere, just invite them to lunch, have coffee with them, get to know them. And then thirdly, I really recommend that Americans become more aware of our foreign policy, become more informed on that, and take a more active role in affecting that foreign policy more towards peace with that part of the world.
All right, you can meet Steve Slocum at 2 book events here in Southern California. The first this Saturday afternoon at Barnes & Noble at the Long Beach Marina Pacifica Mall. The second event Sunday at Barnes & Noble on Westlake Boulevard in Thousand Oaks.
Steve Slocum's North American tour on countering Islamophobia continues with stops in Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver, British Columbia. For more information, check out his website and follow him on social media.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And also San Francisco.
Let's get your free baby body.
I was really happy with that opportunity. I'd never been on TV before. It was the second time. But did you notice on those questions? I mean, I was really happy. Like I say, I don't want to criticize the network, the producers, or the newscasters, but honestly, they had asked us, you know, before you go on an interview like that, they request your talking points and the things that you want to talk about, and you basically lay out a script for the interview, and so we did that, and then I met the producer like 3 minutes before we were going on the air, and the producer said, "Yeah, we're just going to go through the script," and then the questions like, "What?" Like I had, the questions were absolutely not what we had talked about. And I found them, and maybe some of you find them also, but I found them, uninformed. And again, I'm not trying to criticize them, but I only share that. So this is what the news media, and these were nice people. These were good, it's a generally progressive kind of thinking station, and this is the kind of questions that they're asking. So I just share that for that reason. This is what we're up against. Even very kind-hearted, intelligent, progressive thinking people in the media can't even formulate an intelligent question about, what's going on with Muslims in the United States or around the world. So that's why I share that, and so that's why that's why I write the book. So I have some words that I want to share with the Muslim community in terms of this work that I'm doing here. I consider it a partnership. Like I said, I don't speak for you. I don't speak for you. I can't speak for you. All I'm trying to do is clear the fog of misinformation so that you can speak for yourselves. So in that context, I just want to encourage you, try not to personalize your outrage. It's justified. It's justified to have outrage for the things that we saw President Trump say and others say for political gain, and that everyday Americans, non-Muslim Americans, tend to echo or even act out in the streets with violence. Try not to personalize it, because there are hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent to convince these people that these things about Islam that are not true. This is not really who they are. They are people who experienced, things that scare them. For instance, 9/11, and that have been told things that are false about that. So try to keep that in mind. Try not to get too angry. Try not to, especially try not to respond in kind. Don't respond in kind with anger and violence and hatred. Be the good Muslim. Be the good Muslim. Be the best Muslim that you can be, with this gentle spirit that we saw in the Prophet, that no matter when he was attacked, he always responded in not with anger and violence, but if at all possible, with nonviolence. Be that person, and be the best Muslim that you can be, and continue, try to be patient. We have a long way to go, and I know it's a lot to ask, and it brings tears to my eyes to continue. To ask this of you, because I know it isn't fair. It isn't fair. So thank you for your patience, and continue to humbly serve in the way that you know best in your communities. Help your communities, help the homeless, help the poor, stand up for those who don't have a voice for themselves. I know that's what Islam is about. I know that's what you are about. So please continue to do that, and I need your partnership. Like I say, I'm only here to clear the fog. It's really your work. I spoke with an imam in the Seattle area, Brother Jawad, and one of the things that he told me, he was just tirelessly working. I met him on a Friday afternoon. He had just come back from masjid, talking to people, helping people, with their personal issues, and he was exhausted. I met him and his wife in his home, and was talking to him about this work, and he said, "I'm tired." He said, "I'm just so tired. There's not enough of me. I have my own community to support, and for every one of me, there are 100 non-Muslims. There's 3 million Muslims in the United States, and out of 350 million. For every one of me, there's 100 non-Muslims, and that's assuming every Muslim is doing what I'm doing. There's just not enough of me to go around to represent Islam to non-Muslims. So I'm trying to help. I'm trying to help him with that. My book is information that it connects the dots for many people who have this misinformation. So, you know, I don't care about selling my books. You know, I really don't. You know, I lost my son in this. It's more about redemption for me. I really couldn't care less. But you know, it connects the dots for many non-Muslim Americans. So please share my book with people. Then let's talk about social media, how you can partner. You know, social media, the other side, the Islamophobia side, really uses social media effectively. They have money to throw at it. If any of your friends have ever liked anything, you know, that was, you know, put out by, say, a Fox News website, or somebody else who actually has a friend who has Fox News, or any of these, you know, you're going to get this. You are now a target for getting this, and probably some of you even get it, this Islamophobic stuff that comes across in social media, even though, and I do too. I mean, I completely sanitize my social media so that I don't want to see that stuff. I still get it. I cannot help but get that stuff. So what can we do social media-wise? We don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to sponsor Facebook ads and get them, you know, all over, you know. But so we need to do it from a grassroots level. When stuff comes up, please go to my social media, and when I post a blog, when I post a post, from a grassroots level, let's make sure that that stuff gets shared and spread around. You know, we don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to sponsor ads, you know, so that's a way that all of us can participate. And then with respect to events, I'm always looking for new places to have events. If you're a part of a community, whether it's a neighborhood community, a political group, an activist group, an interfaith group, a church group, mostly a group, I look to reach out to those who aren't already part of this. I find a lot of the actual interfaith leaders are completely on board, you know, so that's not where I'm trying to spend my time. I'm trying to spend my time among people who are completely ignorant and unaware. So if you have contacts in these types of communities, please reach out to me, and we'll do events among these groups. So that's all I have to share with you all, and I'm completely open to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's give him a round of applause. That was really, really touching. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go around with the mic now, and let's give our guest congregation members a chance to go first, and then I'll go around with the mic here. So you just want to raise your hand, and I'll reach you here. Let's let our guest go first, please.
I want to thank you for your book and for your work. It's really important because the ignorant about Islam and the history of Islam with Christianity and how it's influenced even a lot of the Western country and Western culture from every aspect. And this has been ignored historically. I want to ask you if you deal with the question of economics, because this has been ignored in a lot of people dealing with Islamophobia. And I remember Kissinger when he said, the oil in the hand of Arab is too valuable to leave it for them. And after that, we have the Gulf War, and then the rest came. So I think that our resources is our curse. And that's the truth. It's not Islam, it's not anything. It is the West want to dominate the oil of that region and the importance of that regions. So, and this thing I think is not explained enough for people to understand. And I hope in the future you can add this to the point you're adding, because you're doing a great job in adding a lot of the point about Islamophobia.
Thank you. Yeah, actually in chapter 4 of my book, I don't go into detail. You could write a whole book about that subject, of course. But in chapter 4, I write about the intervention of the CIA in Iran, specifically around the issue of oil. So even though I don't, I don't fully, develop the concept, I do introduce it in chapter 4. Yeah, you're right. It's very important.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. A lot of what you've said actually resonates with me as well, because I actually hold a table in the farmers market every weekend, and I try to answer questions with the public. And a lot of the time I'm actually deconstructing a lot of their preconceptions. I haven't even got to start to talk about Islam, and it's more about how they perceive Islam. So my question is like, well, it's more of a comment, more to be honest with you. When you hear the word Islamic terrorism or Islamic extremism, it assumes that there's something wrong with Islam, right? The point is that there's only one Islam. There isn't any, there's going to be people who have nefarious ideas, just as like the kamikaze were Buddhists, but we don't say that all of Buddhism is to be blamed for the actions of a few people. Likewise, we don't say the Tamil Tigers who were Hindus. We don't say that the Hindus were, Hinduism is in contempt because of that. So my question is that there's a lot of think tanks that are helping political, ideology, especially for the government as well. You mentioned it earlier about there's an Islamophobia kind of like think tank. Are you presenting information to them or having debates with them to actually dispel such things? Because I think that perhaps gets to the root of things. So, when this becomes policy, because a lot of these think tanks, they actually are adopted by government policy.
Well, to answer your question, there are a few people doing good work in countering Islamophobia. Todd Green is a writer, and he's worked for in government agencies to give support in that area. But from a government perspective, there's very little going on, especially these days. No one is very anxious to hear about it. But what I'm trying to do is, and again, from a grassroots level, we don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars being donated by wealthy, billionaires who have political interests in a certain narrative. So yeah, but we're trying to do that. We basically we're putting a stake in the ground in the month of January. In the city of Ramona, California, which is California District 50, which is a swing district. And I'm not political. I don't care who wins the race. I don't want Islamophobia to be a part of that race. And so what happened was Duncan Hunter was the representative, and he had an opponent whose name was Amar Kampa. Now, Amar is a Christian, but even so, because his name is Amar, Duncan Hunter did a massive Islamophobia campaign, and it worked in the district. So we're going to do an event, a public event. We're going to bring in an organization called Shoulder to Shoulder, which specializes in fear to friendship events to educate people about this, and we're going to do that in that same city to kind of counter that. So yeah, we're addressing it directly head on, but of course, it needs to be supported from the grassroots level. We're bringing in a lot of leaders and training them not to get into fights about this, but to just be aware. When you know the answer to the questions, when people start spewing out this misinformation, it's really easy to shut it down. So we're going to train people, the community leaders, to address that, and hopefully the goal is to take take Islamophobia out of that race. So we hope to, we're doing that in that one district, and we hope to see that multiplied in other areas where it's an issue.
I was listening keenly to your comments, and what struck me and some of the responses of the audience is how different is the plight that you described today different from anti-Semitism in the United States and around the world today?
So you're saying it is different or it isn't different?
It, to me, seems like a mirror image.
Yes. And that's one of the points that I make when I'm speaking in a different audience that's primarily non-Muslim, is that this is just my observation, that and the point was made that, you know, Islamophobia in the United States didn't begin with 9/11. It was, you know, it was going on before that, but I think at 9/11 it definitely kind of exploded. That's a bad word to use. But so what I say is that 9/11 was basically a bona fide, legit trauma. Trauma in the same sense that, you know, a victim of you know, an injury of a combat soldier, or, you know, someone who's attacked in the streets. It was a legitimate trauma that produces post-traumatic stress syndrome, and that collectively and individually, all of us who watched over and over those video clips of these planes full of people smashing into the sides of buildings also full of people, you watch that and it traumatizes you. And so we had this individual trauma, and then the nation as a whole had a collective trauma, and our response is pretty textbook, pretty classic response to that trauma. So back in that time, back in the early 90s, actually not early 90s, but it was early 2001, and the decades between the 60s and the 90s, United States had not done a perfect job, but after the civil rights movement, the whole idea of open racism had kind of been, it was like a genie that had been put back into a bottle and into a jar and a cork put into the lamp, and it still had a heartbeat. It was still alive in the dark rooms, you know, in the back rooms. But there was a cork in it, and a politician his career could be ended by just saying, you know, one little slip up in a public statement that could be construed as racist. That was the environment prior to 9/11/2001. After 9/11/2001, all of a sudden, someone, you know, we as Americans, you know, non-Muslim Americans, you know, we were afraid, and we wanted we wanted not to be afraid anymore, and probably we wanted revenge, and so we took the cork out of that lamp and we let that genie back out, and suddenly it became okay, and a lot of again, I'm not trying to put the blame on anyone. The blame should be spread equally, but a lot of Christian leaders were openly saying things about Islam that were horrible, things that you would never say. You could never say, no one would ever say this about, say, African Americans or Jews. You know, to your question, you know, you wouldn't say that, but towards Muslims, suddenly it was okay to say horrible things in public, whether it was a political leader, a news broadcaster, or just on the streets. It was okay all of a sudden. And when that became okay, it became okay to say that sort of thing about any particular group that you didn't like. And so, yeah, I really believe that this is where, you know, the Jews and the Muslims our brothers and sisters in this. They're both targets now. And it came out as a result of, anti-Muslim sentiment, but it's the same hatred. It's the same hatred. So yes, I agree with you.
I have a suggestion, and it's an old way of marketing. I'll use that word, a little crass, marketing. But there's a very famous company in this country that marketed itself. Tell 8 people your story, and in turn ask those 8 people to tell another 8 people. That company is a very successful company. That was AT&T about 40 years ago.
Okay.
It's really not that difficult.
Yeah, I like that.
And frankly, we have enough people here, if you take the exponential of 8, you could spread that throughout the community remarkably fast.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Thank you. Let's give everybody a round of applause. So I do want to mention that, in August was in California the Muslim Appreciation Month. Our state passed that, and then different cities across the Bay Area, across California, have done that. And I just want to point out Julie Testa from our city council is here. And earlier in this month, the Pleasanton City Council passed a resolution commending the Muslim community and their contributions, and other cities have followed, so thank you for that, Julie. Thank you for attending today. So why do they hate us? The book is here. Steve is here to sign that for you afterwards. We are now going to retire to the fellowship hall, the banquet hall here. We have some snacks for you, and then in about 5 minutes, myself and another young lady from the mosque will be taking around the building and showing you around what a mosque is like. So thank you so much for coming out. Thank you.